Hey everybody, this is your girl NickyNicole of Divas of the Round Table podcast. I'm here today with a special one-on-one interview with Mr. Alonzo Chappell. Mr. Alonzo Chappell is one of 10 children born to Willie and Johnnie Mae Chappell. On the night of March 23rd, 1964, Mrs. Johnnie Mae Chappell became a murder victim during the race riots in Jacksonville, Florida, after being shot from a passing car as she walked along US Highway 1 on Jacksonville's north side. Over the years, there have been many shows, interviews, and reenactments that have been done about the murder of Mrs. Chappell by known KKK members. All you have to do is Google her name, and you can read about the despicable crime, the cover-ups, and the injustices that took place in our city during those turbulent times. But today, we are here to talk about a different story, one that you won't read about. We're here to talk about the lives of Mrs. Johnnie Mae Chappell's family, her children, and her husband in the aftermath of her death. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the son of Mr. Willie and Johnnie Mae Chappell, Alonzo Chappell. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, when I spoke with you, I told you that I was introduced to your brother by my husband.
Okay.
And I remember when we met and your brother said, I think you will want to do a story on my mom. Mm. She was murdered by the Klan in the 60s. And I said, your mother wouldn't happen to be Johnnie Mae Chappell because I already knew your mother's story.
Okay.
I knew your mom's story because my parents live off of US Highway 1.
Okay.
And they have a dedication to a certain amount of highway they dedicate to certain people.
Absolutely.
So through the years, I had seen your mom's name up on that placard. And so I Googled her because I wanted to know who she was. So I was familiar with the story surrounding the murder of your mom. So, you know, I want to just get into the story and talk about things, what transpired and what happened after that, but mostly what happened after that. What happened between you and your family, with you and your family, and especially your dad, because he was left to pick up the pieces.
That's right.
After your mom's murder. So you were about 7 at the time of your mother's murder. Did you personally witness the emotional impact her death had on your brothers and sisters in the immediate aftermath?
Absolutely. It was such a tragedy. You know, we were so young. Mm-hmm. We didn't know exactly what was happening. But my father, from word go, it was all about sheltering us.
Okay.
Matter of fact, when the night of the murder, he was like, y'all stayed out on the floor.
Okay.
Because he didn't really understand where the shooting was coming from, whether they just riding through the neighborhood, shooting up the neighborhood or whatever. Mm-hmm. But his brother, which was my uncle Johnny, from my understanding, had came to inform him of, my mother getting shot, had came to the house. And once Uncle Johnny had said, hey, your wife been shot, so Daddy instantly say, y'all get down on the floor, stay in the house. And he went up to the site. Mm-hmm. And so his first instinct was, to protect us. Stay down. And so we did that, and he went on to the hospital. And, I don't know what transpired there, but later on, he explained to us where she took her last breath at. That was down on the boulevard in 20th Street Expressway, now it's known as Martin Luther King Boulevard.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember the name of that hospital. It was Duval Medical Center.
Duval Medical Center, yeah.
At that time, now it's Shands.
Okay.
And they had called him, and told him, that, she was dead on arrival or something like that. But he came home, and I can't remember, because we were so young at that time.
Okay.
Exactly what happened. But I remember Daddy bringing the clothes back home.
Okay.
and putting them in the room. And but it was such a tragedy. It always haunted me.
Okay.
To know what Daddy went through.
Yeah.
Not knowing the understanding of what a man have to go through to pick up the pieces after a woman, his wife,
yes,
passed. But Daddy was very, very strong.
Yeah.
Now that I'm a man myself and have children,
okay,
I understand it was something else to go through.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was, we all 10 of us, felt that impact. And we live it to this day.
Okay.
It's not like 3 or 4 generations that went by.
Yeah.
We was, right in that. Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that touched me, like just speaking with your brother Willie, and I told him, I said, I know the story,
Right.
but I said, I can't recall what your mom looked like. And he said, because we didn't have any photos of Mama except for your father standing over her, I guess what the newspaper took in the mortuary or at the county coroner
That's right.
office, her basically laying on the table. That was the only picture that he said that you all had of your mom. And I was like, wow, just to have that type of memory of a parent, I could only imagine. And my heart went out to him and you all, which I don't know. I didn't know you all at the time, know. But when he said that, and I was like, wow, because I was trying to put a face with the name. And I was, through all the research and all the stories that I had read and things. And I couldn't. And he said, because there was no pictures.
Right.
That was very, very, touching to me.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, did the loss of your mother bring you all closer as a family, or did it shatter the family dynamic? Like maybe split you all up, or did y'all become a more cohesive unit after the loss of your mom?
Well, we was together with Dad for probably about 3 or 4 years after that.
Okay.
If that long. But the state came in.
Okay.
And divided us, and put us in foster homes and stuff like that. And the reason was stated that my dad was unfit.
Okay.
He couldn't take care, 10 children, and which was far from the truth.
Yes.
Dad owned the land, had like a little farm. We was happy.
Yes.
We was happy, and for whatever reason, the state felt deemed to do that. They did it.
Okay.
And that wasn't anything Dad could do.
Okay.
Nobody came out and said, well, this is what happened. We need to get some type of justice for, Mr. Chappell. Nobody came out and on his behalf. But, he kept in touch with us.
Okay.
He knew where we was.
Okay.
And he would always come, bring us stuff, But so he wasn't like out of the picture, but we was out of the home.
Okay.
And they just put us, some, different foster homes. I went to Mariana. I went to the juvenile shelter, different foster homes. I can't remember all the foster homes. It was numerous of foster homes that we went through.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was definitely a divide.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you think because it was such a public tragedy, that's what basically put your dad under a microscope as far as this, like you said, the state coming in and saying that he was unfit because it was such a public thing and his name was known to city officials, and because of the scandal. Do you think that kind of put a target on him?
I don't know if it was a target. I think they just didn't care.
Okay.
It was more of a cover-up from where it go. The powers to be, like, we want to sweep this under the rug.
Okay.
And I think it's a way of intimidation. So if he did want to, pursue, anything, it was a way of saying this is what we can do.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it now. At that time, I didn't know, but as I understood the story and things unfold, if you say anything, this is it could get a lot worse. So I take your children.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
So now, like I said, we're talking about your dad. in this interview here, because everybody already knows so much about your mom, those that do know the story. And because, like I said, they can Google her and find out about your mom.
Absolutely.
In what ways do you think your father's approach to handling the grief influenced how you and your siblings grew to manage you guys' emotions?
To be honest with you, as I the age I am now,
Mm-hmm.
it's the spirit
Okay.
that bonded us. My dad instilled it in us when we was young. He was always real adamant about these are your people,
Mm-hmm.
which was my aunts, uncles, and he always would, when he came around, he would let us know who was who,
Okay.
and that bonded us. And he always would instill in us, y'all look out for one another, and my brothers and sisters, we, from time to time, we would get with Dad. Matter of fact, we would run away from home.
Mm-hmm.
Run away from foster homes
To get back to Dad.
to go back to Dad,
Mm-hmm.
because he was grounded.
Okay.
He was just, he was just a solid guy, and we would run away, get back out there. They'll come get us, and take us back to the foster care or juvenile shelters or wherever. And but it was always that spirit,
Okay.
that kept us there. You know what I'm saying? Not that because I didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
But even now, we are so close now that we talk every day.
Okay.
Brothers and sisters, those that's still with us. We there's a day I don't talk to my brothers and sisters. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I want to just give a quick shout out to your brother Willie.
Yeah.
Willie's here. He's off camera. He didn't want to be on film today, but he's the one that introduced me to you to get this thing going. So I do see the closeness. And, you speak, I could tell when you speak about your siblings that it comes from the heart. So there is still that bond there, even though the system couldn't separate that.
Exactly.
And so that is, like giving kudos to your dad.
Yeah.
On keeping you guys together and united as family.
Yeah.
So that's kudos to your dad for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, like, with you now being a grown man and having lived life, can you look back now and see the burden weighing heavily on your father, even though he tried to remain strong? Can you see, like, how he was carrying that, looking back now as a grown man?
I could see it, but I couldn't even imagine going through that.
Mm-hmm.
I can see. I remember you would mention Mom, my mother, and Dad would just cry.
Okay.
I remember hearing my daddy pray, and he could pray. He was a deacon at Monterey Church.
Okay.
And I could remember my dad praying some nights. And it sounded like a song. I didn't understand, I didn't know what praying was, but he could pray. And he was a God-fearing man,
Okay.
and that I think that's what kept him, strong throughout.
Yes.
And it helped us get through as well. But me now being the age I am, looking back over his life, it was such a tragedy to him.
Okay.
It was heartbreaking. He was like 80 and a half. He told me to only eat a half hour.
Okay.
When he passed.
Mm-hmm.
But all the years, and he never got over that. Because there wasn't nothing he could do. His hands was really tied. And they had really showed him what could happen.
Yes.
By taking us away from him. But I could definitely.
Okay. Yeah, because that was my next question to ask. Did your father ever speak about directly to you all about the loss of your mom? But you said that he used to talk about her and cry. I want to ask you this, like, did the community and your other family members, did they all rally around your dad to help him with you guys?
We had people to come out.
Mm-hmm.
It was this one lady, Daisy Bell Kelsey. I'll never forget her. she acted like our mother.
Okay.
You know, Dad met her. She had heard the story about our mother. And she really, you know, stepped up and helped with the girls.
Okay.
You know, a lot, you know, because being a man, Daddy didn't know much about girls.
Yes.
And she saw the need there. And she came in and we all just rallied around and called her mom. You know, that was our, you know, new mama. And she would cook for us. We would go up there and hang out with us. And I go by the house now. The house is still standing, you know, her house. And I would always remember Miss Daisy Del Kelsey. There was other people that came out. We had a guy named Rebel McGee. You know, he was a pastor. And so there was a lot of good people.
Okay.
But, you know, the I guess you say there was a limit, you know, you could do. You know what I'm saying? Because powers to be like, you know, this is what it is.
Yeah.
You know, so, yeah.
And there was so much going on back in that time, like we were saying 1964. If my recollection is correct, I think Jacksonville had a hurricane hit that year.
Yeah.
You know, the race riots that was going on and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, when we were talking about doing this show, I actually reached out to my mom because she was 10 years old in 1964.
Yeah.
And, you know, after reading the story and reading about the cover up and how the mayor was at the time and things of that nature, I can only imagine what it was like being African American in Jacksonville in the South at that time.
Yeah.
And, you know, just like we were saying, the cover up and the city officials, you know, they kind of can show you what they would do to you or what they can do.
Right.
And in this case, eventually it took a couple years, but they did hurt your father by taking his children, you know. Not only that, but I mean, that was the insult added to the injury, because the injury was the cover up and basically the injustice that happened with the murder of your mom. So, you know, it's just, you know, I just cringe, think about it, you know, just even doing the research and thinking about things that you all had to live through. Right. And that's why I tell people, even now with the racial climate in this country, I have to tell some of my coworkers, I say, you all got to realize that we're still living with people who actually lived that life and lived during that time. We're raised by these people.
Yes.
You know, you're the same age, you know, close to the same age as my mom, my parents, you know. My father was in Mississippi. Lord only knows. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, this story is near and dear to my heart. It really is. Because like I said, I already knew who your mother was. So meeting your brother, it just seemed like it brought it full circle to me. And that's why when I spoke with you and you know, we talked about highlighting and showcasing your father and how he had to pick up the pieces and go on in this city that had done this thing to him and his family.
And you know, shout outs to you for wanting to, you know, bring up my father, because you know, that was the part that was left out.
Yes.
You know, which was the tragedy of my mother, but, you know, the aftermath, you know, because now she's gone on.
Yes.
But the pain lives on, you know, even to this day.
Yes.
You know, the pain is there. So I really want to thank you for having us, you know, to talk about my father, because that's something that's never really mentioned. And the just to put a little bit more on that was that the men in families, the significance they play.
Yes.
You know, it's overlooked a lot of times. But from my experience having my father, you know, kind of like raise us, it taught us, he always would teach us the work ethic. I have boys now, you know, and I teach them, and that they know it's all about work. You know, it's all about getting it done, you know. And Dad was the kind of person that you didn't have an excuse to not get it done. You get it done.
Yes.
Because you put things higher than you. Because you know there's somebody coming up behind you. Exactly. You know what I'm saying? And so my dad was always about, you know, I want to leave this not to you all, I want to leave this for my grandchildren. Which we was children. We didn't even know what he was talking about. But he was thinking way back then,
Yes.
you know, there's somebody coming up behind you.
Yes.
So you look out for them as well. So that was the emphasis Daddy would always instill in us about holding on,
Okay.
you know, to hope and making it happen. So I can understand his mentality now, you know, about, because he could have got a gun and whatever and went out and just started doing things, but he was thinking about something else.
Yes.
Us, the future. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I really, my hats is off to him as far as, you know, doing the right thing and seeing us come through. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you feel like you or any of your siblings struggle with long-term emotional challenges or trust issues of the police and or city officials because of how they handled your mom's murder? Well, you could just speak for yourself. Have you? You could just keep it real.
Yeah.
Mr. Chappell.
Yeah.
Because you're entitled to that.
Yeah. It's I'm gonna tell you a story happened to me when I was about 17.
Okay.
I was right there on the corner of Jefferson and Union, between Union and State and Jefferson. Police rolled up on me, and he said, "What's your name?" I told him. He said, "You ever been arrested?" I'm about 17 now. He said, "You ever been arrested before?" I said, "No, sir." Very respectful, you know, because Dad always taught us to be respectful. And he said, "You ain't never been arrested?" I said, "No, sir, I've never been arrested." He said, "You ain't never been downtown and been fingerprinted?" I said, "No, sir." He put me in the back of his car. I was 17 and took me downtown and fingerprinted me. So if anything ever come up, they got my fingerprints on record already. You know, so when you say, do I trust the police? No. I'm sure there's some good ones. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure, you know, some would have just said, "Hey, you know, all right, well, you have a nice day. You know, you looked like somebody I thought, you know." But this guy took me down and then made me walk home. Put me out of the car, took me in the booth, in the jailhouse, fingerprinted me, walked me out the door, and told me to get back the best way I can.
Wow.
So, you know, when you look at the system, you know, you can't say, well, is everybody bad? No.
Yeah.
But when you experience something like that, you kind of like, now you got to walk around with eggshells because they got your fingerprints downtown.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
Yeah. Because it's not the system that's broken, it's the people that's broken.
Exactly.
So yeah, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
Don't like it, but sometimes you just got to understand it.
Right.
So let me ask you this. What do you want the legacy of your father and the Chappell family to be? How do you want your dad remembered?
I just want the legacy to be that we were very, you know, positive people, you know, that we, you know, was about right.
Okay.
You know, and we want justice always, you know, nothing negative about, you know, my father. Even in the tragedy after we found out about it, you know, we just like, hey, we just want justice, you know, and it's never too late to do the right thing.
Yes.
You can do the right thing right now, tomorrow, you know. It's a lot easier to give us a sign, a road, you know, sign or whatever, than to do the right thing.
Yeah.
You know, well, you tell me about, okay, well, we spent, you know, blah, blah, blah. But you got a family throughout generations. I mean, my children is being affected by this as well, you know, because I was affected. So there's a lot that I can't do for my children because I still have the trauma.
Generational trauma.
You see what I'm saying? So they can start now. You know, the sign is fine. I love it. There's the hate, but it's more to that.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So you can always do the right thing. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
And lastly, if there was one word to describe your dad, what would that word be?
Spirit.
Spirit.
Yeah.
He had a good spirit.
Very good spirit.
Fighting spirit.
Yes.
Determined spirit.
Always.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Chappell, your family is the epitome of the saying, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. You all persevered and pushed on through such a tragic event that wrecked your family that March evening in 1964. I personally would like to thank you for sharing such a personal family story. And, for those of you who do not know the story of Mrs. Johnnie Mae Chappell, you can Google her name and you can find out about the crime, the cover up, and the slow crawl to justice that the family is still seeking closure on, because it's a lot that wasn't done, or it's more that could be done in the case of Mrs. Johnnie Mae Chappell. I want to thank you for coming on the show. I want to thank your brother, Willie, off camera, for being here supporting you, as true brothers do.
Yes.
I want to thank you all for tuning in. I'm NickyNicole. This is Mr. Alonzo Chappell, son of Mr. Willie and Mrs. Johnnie Mae Chappell. Y'all be blessed. Have a good evening.